pick a destination, but don't expect to get it right in terms of how much time, effort, energy, and money it's going to take to get to that destination. You're probably going to be off target one way or another, and don't make that mean anything. Just, stick with the destination.
2, 1, 0.
Hi and welcome to Stella Life podcast. This is your host Orion. I have with me today Tim Ringgold. He's a board-certified music therapist, author, and award-winning international speaker, having shared the stage with some of the top minds on music, the brain, and personal development, including Tony Robbins. Tim was the first person to give a TEDx talk on music therapy in 2012. In this lovely episode, you're going to learn about the power of music for healing and for addiction recovery, and you will learn the 4-step formula to overcome anything. And now, without further ado, on to the show. Hi, Tim. Welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Orion. It's great to be here.
Yes. Can you share your incredible origin story with us? How did you become the multifaceted person that you are today?
Well, it all started when my parents met. I won't go back that far.
A very long time ago.
A galaxy far, far away. And every year, it's another year further. I am a kid who's still a kid. First of all, let's be very clear. I am an 8-year-old in a 50-year-old body. So it's easy for me to go like whoosh, all the way back. As a kid, there were 2 things that never occurred like work: music and sports. You never had to encourage me, entice me. You know what I mean? Like there was no extrinsic reward necessary or motivation necessary in those 2 worlds.
My little one gets a lollipop after every gymnastic class.
I didn't need a lollipop. I didn't need a lollipop to get there. Actually, it was like you had to drag me off the baseball field or the soccer field, and same with music. It was like, I remember I've been on stage. My first solo, I was 4 as a vocalist, and never occurred like work, always occurred like fun. And so always leaned into it. Many years later, I was able to really understand why. And I'm going to open a loop and say, remind me about Alex Mandossian and what my verb is. And that will make the whole thing make sense. But as a kid, all I noticed was that I had endless energy and curiosity about sports and music. And so I followed both. I was a vocalist. That was my main instrument. And I played soccer. That was my main sport as a kid. Baseball, but also soccer. And then rugby. And I quickly, did well, if you will, for lack of a better phrase. I found myself singing in St. Peter's Square by the time I was 16. I was raised Catholic, so I got the honor of singing at the papal audience during Holy Week in Rome in front of 13,000 Catholic pilgrims from all around the world, singing a solo. And that was really like the heights of, as a growing up in that religion, and I was active in that religion. My mom was like the director of religious education at our little country parish. So that was a deeply moving experience to get to hear my own voice reverberating around the colonnades of St. Peter's Square as a 16-year-old. It was like, that's cool. And at the same time, as you start to get squeezed into the grist mill of college and what are you going to major in and what are you going to do for work, that kind of sausage grinder was tough because I didn't see myself singing opera.
When you said it, I was reminded of the clip, "We don't need no education."
Yeah. In the video, they have the meat grinder, right? Yeah, good shout. That's Pink Floyd was one of my high school identifying imprinting bands. So I love that you just shouted out Pink Floyd. And I didn't fit inside of the mold because I wasn't really interested in music education. I wasn't really interested in, musical theater or opera. So I didn't really know what to do with my love and my talent for music. And so I kind of wandered through the wilderness a little bit until I had a really, really rough defining moment. And, people have different types of defining moments. They're not worth comparing. You just have yours, right? So it's 1995 and I'm at a concert, shouting my head off, having a great time. my 5 best friends had just been murdered.
What?
Yeah. And I come from a small town in Connecticut. That doesn't happen where I'm from. And I ended up going to 5 funerals in 4 days.
Oh my God.
I'd get up, bury a friend, get as hammered as possible, pass out, wake up, and have to do the same thing over the next day and the next day. Oh, and then 2 the following day. Like, can't, just, they don't write scripts like that. You just don't, because you can't relate. It doesn't make any sense, right? And when I went to my friends' memorials and funerals, I sang a song at their memorials and funerals that I had written for them a couple of years earlier. And I used to actually sing it to them on open mic night at our local roadhouse. And it was my way of saying goodbye. And what I noticed was that my community just embraced the song, embraced me. It was so healing for them, but it tore me up to do it. But the night of the last funeral, a friend said, "You want to go see some live music?" And I was like, hell yeah. So we went to a show, and for the first time since I got the news, I found peace. And listen, I'll be honest, no amount of drugs, alcohol, porn, food, nothing numbed that pain all week. And I stacked every substance and behavior I knew to try to numb that pain. I mean, did everything I could. Didn't work. And then at the end of the concert, I sat there and I realized, oh, this is what everyone else was feeling when I was singing my song goodbye.
Wow.
So the whole thing kind of went full circle. And in that moment, I realized, I was like, oh, I could be that for others. Like that context for playing music, I'm in. That's it. I'm in. I'm sold. I'll figure it out along the way. And I kind of dedicated my life in that moment to helping others in their toughest times with music, because that was what music did for me. At the time, since it was received through live concert, I was like, that's what I'll do. I will go out into the music business. I'll be a recording artist, start a band, join a band, whatever it'll be. It'll look like that because it's not going to be on Broadway, ladies and gentlemen. That's not me. And so I just went into the world of the music industry and tried to figure it out. And I learned that Orion, they say sex, drugs, and rock and roll in that order for a reason.
Tell me more.
The culture within the music entertainment industry was quickly, especially because I'm a headbanger. I was playing heavy music, hard rock, heavy metal.
But what were your favorite bands?
When I was coming up as a musician, I was listening to Metallica. I was listening to Megadeth. I was listening to Queensryche.
Me too.
What's that?
Just Metallica and Megadeth.
Yeah. So certified headbanging status right there. And then it got heavier. I got introduced to bands like Machine Head and then Korn, and was like, okay, this is my jam. And what I realized in that world, the game was to maximize the amount of sex you could have, drugs you could take by doing the least amount of music required to get it. So let's say you practice 2 hours a day. You're left with 22 hours minus whatever passed out sleep. And then when you're playing shows, your set is anywhere from 20 minutes to, if you're lucky, 45 to an hour. You're now left with 23 hours of like a void. And what I found was that environment, the cultural current, it was like a current. You fell into it. It was like, have sex, do drugs, have sex, do drugs.
It makes sense. It makes sense. It's neural mirroring. You come around people that thinks in a certain way, and your brain just models that.
100%.
It's on a subconscious level.
I mean, humans are pack animals.
Plus, you were still carrying all the trauma from that terrible, terrible, terrible incident.
Yep.
So it's a perfect fruit salad.
There you go. So as I stumbled through that industry, I could tell in my soul that this is not sustainable. And I met my wife and we dated for like 4.5 years, but I was never going to propose because I wasn't faithful during that time. And I could quit weed. I could stop drinking for a month. There were lots of drugs I just never did to begin with. I was like, no, that's a terrible idea. But the one thing that was like kryptonite, like I was powerless around it, was women and pornography. It was kryptonite for me. And I was powerless. And I was basically relying on your integrity to keep me safe because I had no personal power around. It was just gone. So like, let's say you had like boundaries, great, then I'd be okay. But if you were just as whacked out as I was, it was like chicken, like running right at each other until, and so I got myself into all kinds of trouble. So finally it was like, well, we're stuck. And I was actually in a transformational leadership program called the Introduction Leaders Program through Landmark Education. I was training to be an introduction leader for Landmark.
I did a bit of Landmark myself too.
Yeah. And in that training was where I realized this like impasse I was stuck in. And there was like, I was hiding all of this, like it was just this like double life again, like this duplicity, right? And it was like, what are you hiding? And I was like, I'm hiding that I've been unfaithful and I don't want to tell my girlfriend because if I tell her, she's going to dump me. So we were stuck in this limbo. So then it was like, okay, if I want to have a future, and at the time it was like, if you want to become an introduction leader, like, which I really wanted to, because I wanted to help a lot of people, it's like, you got to work this out.
You got to do the hard thing.
You got to clean up your integrity. So I sat down with my wife, who's now my wife, sat down with my girlfriend, disclosed, and we began a healing journey. And during the healing journey, we both took responsibility for our part in it, in the relationship, in the way the relationship had been built. And we kind of completed the relationship and started a new one. And that was some of the most powerful experiences along the way that I've had, because she could have played the victim card easily and she chose not to.
And she's amazing. Seriously amazing.
It was incredible. And that was the type of woman I wanted to be with. And I walked into a 12-step meeting and promptly jumped right into my own recovery. And she was like, that's the type of person I want to be with. And so when we were in the midst of like the biggest storm of adversity, who showed up like was exactly who the other person would hope would and would want. And so we realized that was like a really good litmus test. When everything's easy, your character doesn't really get revealed. It's when things get tough, and something's on the line.
It reminds me of a little video I saw of a woman walking a dog, and then there's a bear coming, and the dog is like, I'm out of here. Just running away.
Easy to do, right? Like, I'm gone.
Yeah.
And what she said was so powerful. She was like, I could dump you and play the victim card, but I would just bring that victim mentality into my next relationship. And I don't want that for me.
She's awesome. I like your wife a lot.
She's a keeper.
That's powerful. That's a powerful woman.
She is a very powerful woman. And I wanted to give up on me because I was struggling with a lot of shame. Mm-hmm. But I didn't want to give up on her because of the power that she was exuding in this tough time. I was so impressed and so inspired. And one of the great things about Angelique, she's never asked me to change, but I've changed by being around her because of who she is. And so we turned the corner of our relationship and we're engaged, and fast forward, things are going well, and someone buys us, Orion, they buy this little book as an engagement present, and it's called The Hard Questions. 100 questions every couple should ask each other before tying the knot. All right. Well, we've already been through some pretty heavy stuff. We could handle some light reading. And there's a chapter on, family, but career. And it's like, what do you see yourself doing 1 year, 5 years, 10 years from now? And my wife had her MBA at the time. She was like a corporate raider. So she had like pie charts and graphs. She could see her future. It was clear to her. I saw the black hole of the music industry and I just shook my head. I was like, oh man, I can't see a path forward in that culture wanting to honor, because if we start a family, I'm not going to want to miss a minute of it.
I love it. Yes.
But if I want to be a successful recording artist, I got to go out on the road. And in heavy music, you've got to tour and tour and tour because you're not going to get a lot of radio. And so you live and die by being away from home. That's like the whole thing. You want to be out on the road. You want your tour you want to pick up another tour. Then you want to hop to another tour. You want to leave in 1 year and come back 2 years later. That's good business. And I was like, that's terrible family. So I couldn't see how to do both. And I was stuck. And she said, well, if you want to go back to school, we can afford it. And so I listened. And that night I went on our local university's website and I scrolled through the index of majors from A to Z. That was my willingness. And when I hit M, I hit music. And I was like, oh yeah, Music education, no. Music performance, no. Music therapy. What? Wait, what? I had never heard those words put together. Now, the athlete side of me had been a physical therapy patient and was so enamored by that field that I became a physical therapy aide and was considering a career in physical therapy years earlier, but it's very protocol based and it really wasn't like soul and mental. And so it was just physical. And I needed something that touched the soul and the mental side of the equation. And I actually wrote a paper in college called Music versus Medicine.
Nice.
I thought I had to choose one or the other. And then I bumped into this thing called music therapy. And there was like a web page and it had like a paragraph about like the type of work a music therapist does and then the type of person a music therapist is. And the first paragraph read like my dream job. And the second paragraph read like an autobiography. And I was like, what? I could get a degree in being myself. It's really what it felt like. And in that moment at that computer, I filled out my college application. I filled out my FAFSA and I immediately turned towards that. Now, what I didn't know about music majors, I don't know if you've heard this phrase before, but you declare your major.
No.
Okay. So when you go into like you're in a 4-year degree program, right? You go to a 4-year school. Your first 2 years, you're taking gen eds, just your math, your science, your English, your history. But at some point, you have to declare your major, meaning you have to pick a major. So that phrase, declare your major, I always thought that was funny because it's like, today I am blah, blah, blah. And you just register for whatever classes. Cool. Not in music. I didn't know this. You have to audition to be a music major. I was like, what? I declare I'm a music therapy major. And they're like, no, it doesn't work that way. You have to audition. Okay. What do I need to do? Well, you need to perform in front of us. Well, Orion, it had been 12 years, 1 million bong hits, thousands of beers since I had sang anything to anybody. So my voice was in no shape. And I auditioned and I got rejected.
Oh.
And I thought, this is not cool. I thought I just found this whole new thing for me and they slammed the door. So then I got a coach and we worked and I auditioned again. A year of coaching. Every single day I rehearsed every single day for a year. I got rejected again.
No way.
I'm like, come on. This is so not cool. You cannot stand in my way of my future. I refuse. I used to live in Phoenix, Arizona. And the school in question is Arizona State, which has a super competitive music school. But there was this little tiny liberal arts college out in Orange County where my wife did her MBA, private school called Chapman University. They also had a music therapy program. It was 10 times the tuition. And P.S., we lived in Phoenix, but I drove out 6 hours. I sang a 60-second song during my audition and then got in my car and drove home because no one was going to stand in the way of my future. And not only did I get in, I got in with a scholarship.
Beautiful. That's determination.
That was some determination. Like just because you declare something in the world doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen with the amount of effort you estimate or in the time you estimate. And that's one of the big lessons along the way for me has been that pick a destination, but don't expect to get it right in terms of how much time, effort, energy, and money it's going to take to get to that destination.
Yes.
You're probably going to be off target one way or another, and don't make that mean anything. Just, stick with the destination. So I stuck with it. We moved to Southern California. I had many conversations with God about this. I was really a little bit like, dude, we own a home in Phoenix. I'm 10 minutes away from ASU. The tuition is 1/10. What are you doing to me? And this is what he said. He said, Tim, when you were growing up, you used to like skiing. Yeah. When you would pull up to a mountain to go skiing in the morning, and you get to the parking lot and you could see where the lift, could you see where the lift ended? Like, no, because the lift always usually goes over a little bit of a turn and then it opens way up. And the weather at the bottom of the mountain is rarely the same as the weather at the top of the mountain. And so he said, now I just want you to imagine I'm above the mountain looking down on the whole thing. And what I can see, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. You just got to trust me and get on the lift. Mm-hmm. It was so clear. The conversation, Orion, was so clear. Get on the lift. I was like, all right, dude, but only because we're friends. I've trusted you before. You've gotten me out of some tough times. So I'll get on the lift. So we relocated here.
And how was your recovery throughout this whole story?
The first 4 years were terrible. I believed in Tony Robbins. I believed in personal power. I believed that I could do it on my own. And what I noticed was that I couldn't. So I can't speak to anybody else's experience but mine and everyone else that I met in 12-step. And what I found by going into 12-step, I found that recovery is a we thing and addiction is very much a me thing. Addiction is very much a disease of disconnection. And recovery is very much a process of reconnection, but you don't do it by yourself. It's a communal process. And what I learned along the way is that being human is a shared experience. Humans are pack animals. We are not wired to be like bears, independent when we hit 18. It's not how it works. We're interdependent. And I had been relying solely on my independence that I could do it on my own. And you know what? I can put on my clothes by myself. Yes, I can. I can fill out job applications. I can study for a test. There are things I can do by myself. The one thing I figured out I couldn't do by myself was recover. So it took a solid 4 years of really crashing and burning hard before I finally had to lick my wounds and then eat some humble pie and really try on some humility and think maybe I don't have all the answers and maybe it isn't actually designed that way in the first place. And when I was open to that, then I started to get a foothold into what it meant to recover.
I like the image of humble pie. Sounds good. Amazing. So you became a music therapist, but you're not everyday common music therapist. You do something very, very different.
Yeah. As a music therapist, getting to use music as a clinical tool is really cool. We all know music's good for their mind or good for your mood, and your spirit. What my degree was really honing in on was how music affects the brain and the body. Now, what's great about that is that most people have a really positive, personal, powerful relationship with music already. I mean, I've never introduced it to anybody. So it's like a mutual friend between me and anybody I meet, because what your music does for you, my music does for me. It does the same thing. And it doesn't matter. The thing that people get hooked on is that your music should do it for me too. No. Don't get hooked on that. What you love, what comforts you in the way that it does is exactly what the music that I love that comforts me does for me. And because of that relationship, it's such a personal friend that I leverage that in my treatment. So we met through your husband, right? So we have a mutual friend. It's the reason I said yes to this interview without question, right? It was like an automatic reply. Yes, no problem. Let's do it. I don't say yes to every podcast request that comes into my inbox from a complete stranger. It's no. But it was oh, no problem, right? So leveraging that fellow shared trust, that shared affinity, that shared connection allows us to jump right in today together. That's exactly how I think through my relationship with music, with anybody I work with. And then my job is really to just kind of teach them the ways in which they can reach for music based on what they're struggling with, and the ways to watch out for music based on what they're struggling with. Because music can produce therapeutic effects. It can also produce harmful effects, depending on how you use it, when you use it, what you use, etc. So just kind of helping people navigate that. And listen, everybody's used music therapeutically. We've all prescribed ourselves playlists. That's what they're there for, right? They help us in some way do something else. And so there's this intuitive understanding that music has utility. It's not just entertainment or education. It has utility. It always has. So kind of helping people to understand that's legitimate. It's evidence-based. We've researched what everyone's already experienced just to validate it. Thanks. But it allows people to reach for it confidently and reliably as a part of their toolkit to get through their day.
So when you work one-on-one with people, what does music therapists do?
So we work in a lot of different settings in a lot of different ways. So first of all, we work with across the lifespan with anyone from a preterm infant in the neonatal intensive care unit all the way to the elderly who are struggling with dementia and to someone who's actively dying and anywhere in between. And that can be, of course, at any time across the lifespan. So we cradle to grave. Music can be used as a therapeutic tool.
So your avatar is everyone, everywhere, at any age, always.
Not mine personally, but music therapy So different music therapists work with different populations across the lifespan, depending on what they're called to do. And then some work one-on-one, some work in groups, depending on, again, what they want to do. What I found for myself is I really enjoy and have kind of come to specialize in working with people in recovery. No surprise there. Working with people who are struggling with mental health issues, because those go hand in hand. And addiction is usually an attempt to self-soothe that's gone awry. So there's some sort of underlying mental health or trauma that's triggering that in the first place, because it's not the behavior or the substance in and of itself. It's not enough, because then everyone who ever experimented would get addicted, but they don't. So there's underlying issues, which are usually trauma and untreated mental health. And so I found that the most gratifying work for me to do is to work with and have my company work with teens, young adults, adults who are struggling. So depression, anxiety, trauma, addiction, that world, teaching people to reach for music as a tool. That's really, for me, where I find the great satisfaction on my journey right now. So, for example, in mental health, I use an acronym called SOBER. And SOBER stands for 5 benefits that music therapy helps a person in mental health. So it helps them to stay present. When you make music, it forces your brain to focus on the present moment. That's a great practice for someone who's struggling with mental health issues. A lot of those issues are issues with time, being out of time. Anxiety is being out of time, preoccupied with the future. Depression is being out of time, preoccupied with the past. So pulling people out of those head states back into the present moment, using the music making as the tool. So stay present. Open up, how to express your emotions without having to talk about them. We live in a talk-centric culture, and it's not required for healing. And in fact, for trauma, the research is and the literature is clear that you need more than talk therapy if you want to heal trauma. So it's a great tool for expressing buried emotion. The B is for be creative. Creativity is a coping skill. Its main function in humans is problem solving, not art. Art is just an abstract expression of creativity, but its main function, all humans are creative. That's what makes us human. We're not reactive to the environment, internal or external. We actually imagine things and then make them. And so we're all creative, but the main function as an adult, the joke, adulting is hard. What is that saying? It's saying problem solving. Adulting comes with problems every day. And the muscle you use to solve those problems is creativity. And when you have a creative hobby, you strengthen the problem solving part of your brain. And recovery is one big act of creativity. You're just creating a new lifestyle that doesn't involve drinking or drugging. The E is for escape stressors. How do you manage your nervous system? How do you turn stress off? Because if you don't, it turns cravings on. But you can turn stress off quite easily, quite quickly using music. It shuts off the stress response in the nervous system. So being able to reach for it to reset when we're stressed. And then the R is for reconnection. As I alluded to earlier, we need to feel connected to things outside of ourselves as human beings. And so we can connect with the lyrics, we can connect with the beat, we can connect with the bass line, the melody, all different kinds of ways we can connect with music one-on-one while we're trying to figure out which humans around us are safe to connect with.
Nice. Do you also work with frequencies, different frequencies for healing?
I don't. In the music therapy field, we don't work with frequencies. That falls under the sound therapy and sound healing field, because they are focused on individual sounds and frequencies. Music therapy is interested in the gestalt of music, the totality of the music itself, not its individual elements. And that's not to say that if you extract its elements and just use those, that's not effective, because we in music therapy do just use rhythm to help neurologic rehabilitation. But in the music therapy world, we don't explore the world of frequency. Although I have friends who do and do great work in that space.
Yes. Can you explain the 4-step formula to overcoming everything?
Sure, I can explain that. Side note along the way, Angelique and I get married, have our first kid. We have the vision of having a family, and lucky enough to have our first daughter, Allie. And what you were alluding to is the acronym VERO. I love an acronym. I think they make, remembering things easy. So VERO is this formula, and I'll kind of explain where it came from and what it is. So our second kid was named Bella. Bella was born in 2009, and she died in 2010 from a rare genetic disease. And I was on stage a month to the day after she died. raising money for a cure. And the stage I was on happened to be shared that day by a guy named Jack Canfield, who wrote the Success Principles and was co-author of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And during his presentation, he had a slide up on the screen, and it said E plus R equals O, where of E equals events, R equals response, O equals outcome. And his point was, it's not the events in life, it's how you respond to them. It's very empowering. I like that. And when I saw that slide, I realized that was like a formula, like almost like a math formula for how I had just lived through Bella's life. It wasn't what happened to Bella or what Bella did or anything. It was how we responded. And I blogged about her whole journey, and our response to the conditions and situations that she went through. Turns out it was really inspiring to a lot of other people. They couldn't believe how we were able to maintain our marriage, our family, our faith through that journey, such that when she died, there were 30,000 people that visited her blog that day in 2010 from all over the world. And we did a memorial for her, and we live streamed it. This is in 2010. And we had 700 people from all around the world attend her memorial. It was bizarre. It was such a weird thing because of the blogosphere was this space back in the, 2009, 10, right around that time. Blogs were huge, and they were passed around. They were like the podcast of today, right?
Yeah.
And so I wrote a blog that got picked up in the kind of the special needs kid, medically fragile kid, family world, and followed all around the world. And so what I realized was when Jack put that slide up, he had given a formula to what I had lived, which meant he had codified it. And it meant it wasn't just me. And I was excited about that because I didn't like the idea that people kept saying to me, I could never do that. And I was like, yeah, you can. I'm not special. We have the same, chromosomes. Like, it's not me. I'm not special. You can do this too. And so, but the equation was missing something, which is this creativity piece. Like humans, we create the world we live in, unless we don't. And what I mean by that is many of us forget that we have this creative power to make the world that is around us, and we just inherit the world we're in. We inherit our parents' world, we inherit our teacher's world, our coach's world, our spouse's world, our spouse's family's world. And it's really important to remember that if you can envision, have a vision for something, that's what triggers your creativity. So I added the V to the equation. And I felt this is now really telling the whole story, because you can have a vision for something and then life happens and it deviates quickly from your vision. And now you are charged with, what are you going to do? Are you just going to take it and make up that there's some sort of meaning, or are you going to respond? And what I found is humans always get the last word. We always get the last word. Something happens, you get to make an interpretation about what just happened. We judge what happens.
Yes.
The things don't have any meaning in and of themselves, save the meaning we give them. And the moment you realize you're the one who makes up the meaning, well, you can make up anything you want. And that's incredibly empowering in any adverse situation. It turns a negative stress into a positive stress instantly. And the human body will respond differently if it thinks the stressor it's engaged with is healthy or positive versus unhealthy or negative.
Yes, but how did you overcome something so terrible?
Oh, it was easy.
That's beyond.
No, not at all. See, this is the thing. When you're in it, the human body and the human brain and the human spirit activates. When you consider it, you're only thinking from your mind. You don't have access to your strength, your superpowers, because this is what happens to everybody. We hear someone else's situation and our mind says, I don't know how you did what you did. It's like, of course not, because I wasn't operating from my mind. I was operating from the whole of me who is in the situation. The whole of me is my mind, my body, my spirit, my community, all co-creating in the present moment. But if you're not in the present moment, it doesn't work, because you just don't have access to all of that at the same time.
Yeah, and thank God you had so much support.
You have to. We all do. Humans are, again, this is so important. In the 20th century, we created this thing called the nuclear family. It was a disaster. Throughout human history, we did not exist as independent pods of mother, father, and 2.5 kids. This was not done anywhere.
Now 1.5
Right.
going to 0. Like, people don't procreate anymore.
That's right. And the higher the degrees of the parents, the less kids they have. So there's a real issue with this. It's a real issue. And why do you think that divorce went through the roof once we moved away from our families of origin? Because we're not meant to be everything but for that one other person. We can't possibly be. You can't fill the role because family was never raised by the two biological parents independently. This was never done.
Yeah, I'm from Israel, and this is like I'm Israeli American, so this is my home as well. But what I'm missing here with the culture here is that it's very hard to get a real sense of community, where in Israel it's just so easy. You're always surrounded by people who will be there for you and talk to you. I don't know. It's just culturally here, it's almost like every man for themselves, every
You're right.
little family pod for themselves. It's very different, and I still cannot wrap my head around it. That's why a lot of people are suffering.
100%. I'll give a quick little explanation why it happened in the United States. The United States geographically is massive. After World War II, we invented freeways, the interstate freeway system. We invented commercial air travel, and we invented suburbs. These are all post-World War II inventions, which allowed the family to move away logistically rather easily from their family of origin and relocate to anywhere they wanted to go. At that same time, the idea of the nuclear family as a construct that was self-sufficient was theorized, that this is a self-sufficient model for raising a family. If you now look 70 years later, it was a disaster because divorce has gone through the roof. Physical health has gone down terribly. Life expectancy was starting to drop in the United States prior to COVID for the first time since the Spanish flu because of all of the mental health issues, the suicides, the drug overdoses. I mean, all the key performance indicators show that physical health and mental health have suffered greatly ever since we split up.
Yeah, if you look at blue zones like Okinawa, and the women that live in, to be 100, 110, or even more, and at 90, they still climb trees and harvest their crops. They are surrounded by their children and grandchildren and grandchildren. It's all about, of course, eating healthy and all that. But mostly, I think it's community. It's the feeling like you belong somewhere, like people got your back.
Yep. One of the mistakes of the United States is the culture of self-determinism. It's nice to be independent from tyranny, but you're not meant to be independent as a human. You're meant to be interdependent as a human. So I lean on you, you lean on me. We don't keep score. I take care of me for you so that when you're down and dependent, I can take care of you in addition to me. And so all you have to do is just look back through human history. Like, how did we do it? How did we survive within much worse conditions than we have now? Well, because we relied on more than just mom and dad for all of our needs. And as soon as we broke away from that, the results have been disastrous. And so you have to have strong social bonds, which is like family. You need weak social bonds, which are your neighbors and your community. And in the United States, like in suburbia, do you know who lives 2 doors down? You might know who lives next door, and you might not hang out with them. But do you really even know who lives 2 doors down? And the answer is shockingly how few people know who lives just 2 doors down.
Yes. Where in Israel, it's like everybody's in your business and everybody knows who lives.
Absolutely.
Which can only be an extreme. That can be an extreme too.
100%. 100%. But if you kind of like pull it out to like a macro scale, that is a cost worth paying, because what you see in the absence of that is depression. You see substance abuse. You see behavioral abuse. You see spousal and child abuse. You see anxiety. You see addiction. You see overdose, you see cancer, like you see stress levels through the roof, heart disease. Like, it's not like you have to look far to see the wreckage that this idea has promoted. And so all along the way, one of the things that I've always been good at since 12-step was what taught me I can't do this on my own, and I don't have to. And so I learned to be humble enough to lean back and have others catch me when I'm too tired to stand on my own.
I love that. And I would love to talk to you for like probably 10 or 20 or 30 or so many more hours, because I feel like I didn't even ask half or 2/3 of my questions, and there's so much more to learn from you. But before we say goodbye for now, what are your 3 top tips to living a stellar life. And where can people find you?
Find me online, timringgold.com, 2 G's in my last name, or on Instagram or Facebook, Tim Ringgold. That's where you can find me and follow me there. I have a useful podcast. If stress is something you're struggling with, just look up Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. It's an entire library of relaxation music and interviews with stress experts. That's a free resource out on Apple Music and Spotify. Gosh, what like if I could narrow it down, I've been beating the drum on this, which is like community. It's all about community. You're not meant to be alone. You're not meant to do this by yourself, and you don't have to. Don't keep score. Don't keep score. I got your back today because you're going to have my back tomorrow, and we don't know what's coming around the corner. You can't predict. Create the world you want. Otherwise, you're going to inherit the world someone else created.
I love that.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. I mean, I think that when they say man was created in God's image, for me, that's not a biped on 2 feet. That's we have the ability to create. And that's what makes us human. That's a gift you've been given. So go use that muscle. It feels great. And to close the loop from the beginning, when I said, what's my verb? My verb is play. So what you can count on from me is that what I'm doing in anything is playing. And that's why I am a music therapist and a professional pickleball player, because my 2 worlds, my verb in both of them, I play music and I play pickleball. So find your verb, and just because you're an adult doesn't mean you're not meant to play anymore.
Yes. Thank you so much, Tim.
Thanks for having me.
This was incredible. It was very pleasurable. Thank you so much. And thank you, listeners. Remember to live in community, don't keep score, create the world you want, and play, 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 and have a stellar life. This is Orion. Till next time.